One of the craziest accusations in defense of John 3:16 promoting a crossless gospel, which in defense I proved that it didn't, is in fact the gospel most people hold traditionally to. And their main defense is 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4, Paul's gospel, a crossless gospel. And in broader sense, from a logical standpoint, yes. By what means, what grounds do I have authority to say such a thing? I will explain. Is the word cross mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4? No. Is that a crossless gospel? And the fact that cross is not mentioned, yes. Is in the fact that 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4 all takes place on a cross? Is that there? Absolutely. But does the word cross, is it presented in 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4? No. Is the word cross presented in 1 Corinthians? Yes. Is it presented in 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4? No. Where is it presented? I will get into it and I will explain the whole, since this is a defense of 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4 in the most craziest sense, because the one verse, I should say the four verses that hold traditional to the point of view is that everything else is a crossless gospel. In a broader sense, from a logical standpoint, is the word cross used in 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4? No. But is the act of it happening on a cross take place in 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4? Yes. Let me go into it. This will all be explained before anyone wants to put on a point me out, condemn me, whatever you guys want to do. Let me justify my sayings first before you can throw out such accusations. Let's go into it. 1 Corinthians, let's go to chapter 1, 17 and 18. It says, "For Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect." So we know that mentioning the gospel, we bring forth the cross. Now, the fact that cross is not used in 1 Corinthians 1 through 4 does not mean that it is voided from 1 Corinthians 1 through 4. It just means that the word cross is not presently there, but the act of it taking place on a cross is there. And let's go to 18. "For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved is the power of God." Now let's go back into it. For the preaching of the cross, he's saying Christ sent me not to baptize but to preach the gospel. Now he's saying preaching the cross. Is the cross and the gospel the same thing? 1 Corinthians 1 through 4. Yes, and the fact that it takes place on a cross. Now back to the fact is that John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life." In a broader sense, this is all taking place on the fact that it is mentioning a cross. Go back to 14. "As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up." Where was he lifted up? On the cross of Calvary 2,000 years ago. Why was he there? He died for the sins of the world, was buried, rose again the third day. That's why I think that in a very strange contrast, John 3:16 in full context with John 3:14, then you have John 3:15, but John 3:14 in full context, or excuse me, John 3:16 in full context, mentioning John 3:14, knowing that it takes place on a cross, knowing that the gospel is in preaching the cross, or preaching the gospel is in fact taking place on a cross, and that we know that Jesus Christ was on a cross to die for the sins of the world, was buried, and rose again the third day. He died for the sins of the world on a cross. And also in the fact is that is 1 Corinthians 15:1 through 4 a bloodless gospel? Is blood mentioned in 1 Corinthians 1 through 4? No. But is the fact that blood was taking place? Absolutely. How do we know that? Because Christ shed his blood on the cross to die for the sins of the world, was buried, rose again the third day. So even the fact that the cross or blood is not mentioned in 1 Corinthians 1 through 4 or John 3:16 in full context, we know that absolutely is pertaining to the blood and the cross. So let me read in 1 Corinthians 1 through 4. "Moreover, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel which I have preached unto you, which also you have received, and wherein ye stand, by which also you are saved, if you keep in memory what I preached unto you, unless ye have believed in vain. For I delivered unto you first of all, which I also received, how that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures." Hallelujah. That is the good news of Jesus Christ. Someone coming from an outside standpoint, that is the good news, and if you believe that, you're saved forever. The third video of this will be in defense of John 3:16 and 1 Corinthians 1 through 4 do mention the blood, and the fact that blood is not, the word blood is not presently seen in 1 Corinthians 1 through 4, but the act thereof of it taking place is presently in 1 Corinthians 1 through 4 and John 3:16 in full context. The third video will be in defense of the blood. This is the defense video of 1 Corinthians 1 through 4, not a crossless gospel, in the strangest sense, in the fact that the word cross is not mentioned, but the act of it taking place on a cross is presently there, knowing that 1 Corinthians 1 through 4 is not a crossless gospel, knowing that John 3:16 in full context with John 3:14 is not also a crossless gospel, and the fact that the good news of Jesus Christ gives everlasting life to anyone who believes in him, because he died for the sins of the world on a cross, that he shed his blood for the sins of the world, was buried, and rose again. Why did he do this? Because he loved the world. and also we have His grace, but that'll be in a future video. Thank you and God bless.